来人了，现在。
我害怕。
The opener of World Day. Planet 12 and the Nazareth Island. Students on the home. This is for Lamo. Also the lesson and the first. We are listening to his. Meanwhile, the content began as the two friends. A lesson into the full of the films. Principal house. Saying that the home your game. And announced the new political calendar in late autumn. The water in the corruption and the announcement of the is a culture. We are commemorating the 40 and the 40th appearance of the United States. The outcome of the next doesn't turn the way. In the way of course. On course and here is the case. Also the belief. And the image of the control of Today I am in the plan for as well as the case began a lane. This is what AIBA of the home. And trade deficit issued an executive order claiming that China, Japan, and Canada and other foreign countries levied large tariffs on imports. Then some affected companies filed lawsuits including California, Washington and Washington. Democrats also supported in the courts. These lawsuits, pointing out that state governments and their businesses and consumers are being harmed. The plaintiffs believe that the federal government's approach exceeded the president's statutory authority in peacetime and violated the congressional power to regulate tariffs. This May, the U.S. South International Trade Court in Manhattan, New York, ruled that the Trump administration lost. After the loss, the Justice Department represented the government appealed to the higher court in September. 快叫妈妈来人了
Decided to merge.
Appeal upon the court of the incident for the civil original decided among the fancy
It seems to have reached a turning point in power collision again. In 1803, the third president Thomas Jefferson was indignant. The Supreme Court in Marbury v. Madison case established the judicial review principle as a violation of executive power. In 1937, the 32nd president, Franklin D. Because the Supreme Court rejected his new laws, planned to expand the court, trying to reshape the judicial landscape by adding judges. Now, the 45th and 47th President Donald Trump is using a bolder approach. Again, in this power game that has lasted for more than 2 centuries, to write his own chapter for the Trump administration. The Supreme Court's tariff hearing is crucial. It's not only related to the trade policy of tens of billions of dollars, but also touches on the boundaries of presidential power. As November 5th's oral argument day approaches, President Trump announced that he will personally attend this important hearing. On October 22nd, he said when meeting NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg, I think this is one of the most important decisions. I really believe I have an obligation to be there. On Friday, October 24th, Trump posted several posts on social media defending the tariffs, saying they are crucial to national security and economy. He said the Supreme Court battle is the most important case in history. One of them said that Ford and General Motors, on large and medium-sized trucks from other countries, have imposed significantly higher tariffs. Thank you, President Trump. Recently, President Trump announced will impose higher import tariffs on medium and heavy trucks. Will impose higher import tariffs. According to the latest reports, this tariff policy will take effect on November 1st, 2025, with a tariff rate of about 25%. President Trump said that aims to protect the domestic auto manufacturing industry, especially in the field of
你
truck
写
production.
作业吧，我那个趁你是要干嘛？
但
Analysts
是放
pointed
在
out
风
that
声的
the
和
policy will significantly
拿了有
increase
点
the
喷
cost
那个风，
in the U.S. market,
那个
thus providing a competitive advantage for domestic companies, such as Ford and General Motors, a competitive edge. Because of this, comments like "Thank you, President Trump," comments expressing their approval of the government's support for U.S.-made products. Legal experts said that President Trump seems to be preparing for the 3 Supreme Court justices to prepare for the debate, and these 3 justices, who were appointed by him during his tenure, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. Here, Carlton Lane, a constitutional law professor at Carlton B. Byers said, "The president personally attends the Supreme Court. Oral arguments is extremely rare and may even be unprecedented." He said that the justices are unlikely to be affected, but if feel the attention and pressure from the president, this move may have unexpected counter effects. The libertarian think tank Clark, a trade policy researcher at the Cato Institute, Clark Packard thinks that the outcome of this tariff is quite uncertain. It's almost like a coin toss, and the government has expected this. He mentioned that tariff policy is an important part of the president's economic agenda. The relevant judgment may have a key impact on the overall policy direction. Packard also believes that it is not unusual for the president to attend the debate, but this move is in line with Trump's direct and strong approach to intervene in major affairs. Thomas Hogan, an associate professor at South Texas, Thomas Hogan said that it is often said that the U.S. has separation of powers. It's more accurate to say that it's a constant power tug-of-war. He also believes that the current Supreme Court seems to favor a stronger executive branch. However, Hogan also added that the president may be worried that attending Supreme Court arguments in person might make the judges feel uneasy. Such public appearances could be seen as a political signal or as an interference with judicial independence. Its impact is unpredictable. It's worth noting that on Thursday, October 23rd, President Trump suddenly terminated the trade negotiations with Canada. According to White House officials, this decision was made when the negotiations entered a critical stage, which caught the world off guard. Trump accused Canada, especially the Ontario government, for trying to use political means, interfere with the customs case being heard by the Supreme Court. As we all know, Ontario is Canada's largest economic province, whose economy relies heavily on U.S.-Canada trade, especially manufacturing, automobile parts, metal processing. Many products are exported to the U.S. Therefore, the province tried to use advertising, remind the American people and the court, to oppose Trump's tariff policy. Around mid-October, the Ontario government in the U.S. media, to run a controversial advertisement, replayed a speech fragment by former President Ronald Reagan's speech in 1987. In the video, Reagan said, "Abuse of tariffs will lead to the collapse of the free trade system." The ad cost about 75 million Canadian dollars, equivalent to 53.3 million US dollars. Ontario's Premier Doug Ford said that the advertisement will be the first 2 games of the World Series, continue to be broadcast, and will be removed next Monday. This move is to cooperate with and promote the trade negotiation process between the U.S. and Canada. Of course, as an anti-Trump premier, Ford has broader political aims, including influencing American public opinion, attacking the Trump administration, and enhance his political image. Ford's office, in a statement to the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, claimed that the Reagan's speech clips used in the ad came from publicly available public domain materials. The quoted content has not been edited. However, according to several media reports, the advertisement from a radio speech by President Reagan in 1987, selected different clips, and by re-editing them, to piece them together. Although these statements did come from Reagan, they were not originally consecutive, nor were they published in the same context. In terms of language, the advertisement did not directly tamper with Reagan's words. The quoted sentences are consistent with his public speeches. However, by rearranging the word order and context, the overall meaning conveyed by the advertisement has undergone a subtle change. Shortly after the advertisement was aired, the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute, pointing out that the advertisement by editing video clips of President Reagan distorted the content of his original speech and emphasized that the production and release of the ad and edited the speech materials without authorization, the foundation said, has initiated a legal assessment process and decided whether to take further action. Trump responded on social media that Canada was caught cheating. They published a large purchase advertisement saying that Ronald Reagan didn't like tariffs, but in fact, he liked tariffs for our country and national security. Canada is trying to, in one of the most important rulings in our history, illegally influencing the U.S. Supreme Court. Trump also said that Canada has long been cheating on tariffs and charged our farmers more than 400%. Now, they and other countries can no longer take advantage of the U.S. Thanks to Ronald Reagan Foundation. The Ronald Reagan Foundation exposed this scam. Make America great again. Then Trump added in another post that they do this just to interfere with the U.S. Supreme Court and other courts. Tariffs are very important to U.S. national security and economy. Given their bad behavior, we hereby terminate all trade negotiations with Canada. On October 25th, President Trump posted again, pointing out Canada's purpose. He wrote that the only purpose of this fraud is Canada is trying to use the U.S. Supreme Court to help. Over the years, they have used tariffs to harm American interests. Now the U.S. can finally fight back against Canada and other countries around the world. High and domineering tariffs. President Reagan strongly supported tariffs, strongly supported the tariff policy. Canada claimed it was against it. The ad should have been removed immediately, but the Canadian government knew its fraudulent nature. Continued to be played during the World Series last night. Trump finally said that, given its serious distortion of facts and hostile actions, I will impose a 10% tariff on Canada, making its tax burden far exceed the current level. Under Trump's strong offensive, on October 25th, Ontario Premier Doug Ford announced he would suspend the controversial anti-tariff ad campaign. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said, Canada is still willing to have discussions. Currently, about 3/4 of Canada's exports go to the U.S., accounting for nearly a quarter of the country's GDP, while imports from the U.S. account for about 16.7%. Finally, let's talk about Trump's recent important legal victory. On Friday, October 24th, President Trump, against Iowa, a well-known polling agency, he achieved a phased victory. The defendants in the case include the famous pollster Ansel, Zay, and the Des Moines Register. Trump's team accused, during the 2024 presidential election, seriously misled voters, deliberately released false polls, announcing that in Iowa, was behind Democratic candidate Kamala Harris. Harris, thereby interfering with the fairness of the election. The complaint states that the Des Moines Register and its partner, USA, and its partner Mediacom released the last Iowa poll data, showed that Democratic candidate Kamala Harris was 3 points ahead of President Trump. Trump's side argued that this data is in stark contrast to the previous September poll. Trump leading by 4 points, forming a stark contrast. A 7-point change in a short period of time, which deserves further review. Ansar is known for its high predictive accuracy. This poll was widely quoted by major media before the election, and regarded as the trend of the Midwest election. However, The final election results did not match the polls, so the outside world questioned its data, methods, and sample representativeness. The case was originally transferred to a federal court, but Trump's lawyers argued that the case should be handled by state courts. They believe that poll manipulation mainly occurred in Iowa, which falls under state judicial jurisdiction. Previously, a federal judge appointed by former President Obama had rejected Trump's team's request to transfer the case to the Iowa State Court. However, this ruling was recently overturned by the U.S. 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. In a stern ruling opinion, Circuit, the court, approved Trump's application for a writ of mandamus petition, which is used to correct major legal errors. The upcoming November 5th oral argument day, President Trump announced that he would attend the Supreme Court to defend his tariff policy. This move is extremely rare and also raised questions from the outside world. Will we witness history? Meanwhile, the Canadian Reagan advertising scandal continues to ferment, allegedly intended to interfere in this crucial debate. President Trump responded firmly, saying that the U.S. will not be used by Canada again, and announced a new round of tariffs on Canada. In late autumn, the weather in Washington is getting cooler, and a sense of tension in the air. The Supreme Court of the United States courtroom will welcome a rare VIP, the 45th and 47th President of the United States. On November 5th, in the courtroom that can hold about 400 people, President Trump will appear in the VIP section of the court, in front of the 9 justices, on 2 crucial cases of external tariffs. Hear the case. Attending the hearing were also Justice Department lawyers and individuals who sued the Trump administration, state governments and interest groups' legal representatives, as well as journalists and observers. The case began in April this year. The Trump administration, based on the international emergency, IEPA, citing national emergencies and trade deficit as reasons, issued an executive order claiming that China, the EU, Japan, and Canada and other more than 100 countries levied large tariffs on imports. Then some affected companies filed lawsuits against the Trump administration, including California and Washington state. Democratic governments also supported in court as amicus curiae these lawsuits, pointing out that state governments and their businesses and consumers are being harmed. The plaintiffs believe that the federal government's approach exceeded the president's statutory authority in peacetime and violated the congressional power to regulate tariffs. This May, the U.S. South International Trade Court in Manhattan, New York, ruled that the Trump administration lost. After the loss, the Justice Department represented the government, appealed to the higher court and the Supreme Court. In September, the Supreme Court decided to merge, which were learning resources and BSA selections, and scheduled an oral argument on November 5th. At this moment, history seems to have reached a turning point of power collision again. In 1803, the third President Thomas Jefferson was indignant that the Supreme Court in Marbury v. Madison case established the judicial review principle as a violation of executive power. In 1937, the 32nd President, Franklin D. Roosevelt, because the Supreme Court repeatedly rejected his new laws, proposed a plan to expand the court, trying to reshape the judicial landscape by adding judges. Now, the 45th and 47th President, Donald Trump, is using a bolder approach. Again, in this power game that has lasted for more than 2 centuries, to write his own chapter. For the Trump administration, the Supreme Court's tariff hearing is crucial. It's not only related to the trade policy of tens of billions of dollars, but also touches on the boundaries of presidential power. As November 5th's oral argument day approaches, President Trump announced that he will personally attend this important hearing. On October 22nd, he said when meeting NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg, "I think this is one of the most important decisions. I really believe I have an obligation to be there." On Friday, October 24th, Trump posted several posts on social media, defending the tariffs, saying they are crucial to national security and economy. He said the Supreme Court battle is the most important case in history. One of them said that Ford and General Motors, on large and medium-sized trucks from other countries, have imposed significantly higher tariffs. Thank you, President Trump. Recently, President Trump announced, will impose higher import tariffs on medium and heavy trucks. Will impose higher import tariffs. According to the latest reports, this tariff policy will take effect on November 1st, 2025, with a tariff rate of about 25%. President Trump said that aims to protect the domestic auto manufacturing industry, especially in the field of truck production, and reduce dependence on foreign supply chains. Analysts pointed out that the policy will significantly increase the cost in the U.S. market, thus providing a competitive advantage for domestic companies, such as Ford and General Motors, a competitive edge. Because of this, comments like "Thank you, President Trump." Comments expressing their approval of the government's support for U.S.-made products. Legal experts said that President Trump seems to be preparing for the 3 Supreme Court justices to prepare for the debate, and these 3 justices, who were appointed by him during his tenure, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. Tier. Carlton Lane, a constitutional law professor at Carlton B. Fire said, the president personally attends the Supreme Court. Oral arguments is extremely rare and may even be unprecedented. He said that the justices are unlikely to be affected, but if feel the attention and pressure from the president, this move may have unexpected counter-effects. The libertarian think tank. Clark, a trade policy researcher at the Cato Institute. Clark Packard thinks that the outcome of this tariff case is quite uncertain. It's almost like a coin toss, and the government has expected this. He mentioned that tariff policy is an important part of the president's economic agenda. The relevant judgment may have a key impact on the overall policy direction. Packard also believes that it is not unusual for the president to attend the debate, but this move is in line with Trump's direct and strong approach to intervene in major affairs. Thomas Hogan, an associate professor at South Texas. Thomas Hogan said that it is often said that the U.S. has separation of powers, but it's more accurate to say that it's a constant power tug-of-war. He also believes that the current Supreme Court seems to favor a stronger executive branch. However, Hogan also added that the president may be worried that attending Supreme Court arguments in person might make the judges feel uneasy. Such public appearances could be seen as a political signal or as an interference with judicial independence. Its impact is unpredictable. It's worth noting that on Thursday, October 23rd, President Trump suddenly announced terminated the trade negotiations with Canada. According to White House officials, this decision was made when the negotiations entered a critical stage, which caught the world off guard. Trump accused Canada, especially the Ontario government, for trying to use political means, interfere with the customs case being heard by the Supreme Court. As we all know, Ontario is Canada's largest economic province, whose economy relies heavily on U.S.-Canada trade, especially manufacturing, automobile parts, metal processing. Many products are exported to the U.S. Therefore, the province tried to use advertising, remind the American people and the court, to oppose Trump's tariff policy. Around mid-October, the Ontario government in the U.S. media to run a controversial advertisement replayed a speech fragment by former President Ronald Reagan's speech in 1987. In the video, Reagan said, "Abuse of tariffs will lead to the collapse of the free trade system." The ad cost about 75 million Canadian dollars, equivalent to 53.3 million US dollars. Ontario's Premier Doug Ford said that the advertisement will be the first 2 games of the World Series. continue to be
啊，
broadcast
那因为
and will
啊
be removed next Monday. This move is to cooperate.
啊，你说那个就跑过来了。
Trade negotiation process between the US and Canada.
有女生睡衣，
Of course,
你想
as
不
an
想要？
anti-Trump premier, Ford has broader political aims,
你想不想要？
including influencing
哎，
American
你
public
再买一
opinion,
个给我，你买
attacking
一
the
个，
Trump
就
administration,
两套行不行？
and enhance his political
2
image.
块钱，
Ford's office,
两套。
in a statement to the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation,
哪哪啊？
the Reagan's speech clips
俺
used
就
in the
看
ad
了，这里
came
有
from
2块
publicly
钱啊。
available public domain materials. The quoted content has not been edited. However, according to several media reports,
行行，
the
给
advertisement
姐姐那个好可
from a
爱。
radio speech by
可是
President
我
Reagan
我
in
想要那个
1987
这个给你。
selected different clips, and by re-editing them, to piece them together. Although these statements did come from Reagan, they were not original.